Hi everyone, my name is Matt and welcome to my channel. We need some more 40k content on here, so let's paint a Striking Scorpion from the Blades of Khaine Killteam box. After assembling the model, I attached it to a cork with superglue and undercoated white with my airbrush. If you don't have an airbrush, a spray can will work just fine too. First up, let's tackle the armor, and I'm beginning with a layer of orc flesh contrast paint. Work on one area at a time, and apply plenty of paint so it flows into the recesses. Then use the brush to soak up any excess paint as needed. I'm not too worried about being neat at this stage, since I'll be painting nearly everything else with opaque paint. I do want to be careful around the helmet though, since that will be yellow and I want to do my best to keep it as clean as possible. After that layer dried, I painted a second layer for a deeper color and a more even finish. Even after a second layer, the green armor is still a little uneven. A glaze with Warpstone glow will help even out the surface. Thin the paint slightly with water, and with barely any paint on your brush, paint over any edges where the surface looks uneven. When you lift the brush off the model, the brush will deposit more paint in the last spot it touches, so I like to move the brush towards the highlights, and end my brush strokes in the top part of each armor section. We'll leave the armor for now and move on to painting the helmet with Iyanden yellow. I'm not worried about getting any paint on the mask or the hair, since I'll be using opaque paint for that later. The most important thing is to make sure the yellow is smooth and even. After the first layer dried, I painted a second for an even finish. I'm really happy with the orangey color that's in the shadows, but I'd like the rest of the helmet to be brighter, so I glazed over most of the helmet with some slightly thinned flash Gitz yellow. It may take a couple thin layers for a smooth finish. Now is a great time for me to ask you to do those YouTube things that we all love so much. If you're liking the video so far, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future content. If you really like what I'm doing here and want to support the channel further, consider being a channel member. We have some perks including a Discord server and early access to videos. Next, I painted everything else with thinned black paint. The green armor stage got a little messy, and if I continue with contrast paints, I'll have to repaint everything with white first. That would be really time consuming, so instead I'll be moving on to opaque paints, and black will provide a good undercoat for the next layers. There are some markings on the armor that I'd like to paint yellow, and Jokaero orange will be a good base coat color. It's a very similar color to the shadow areas on the helmet, and it's also very opaque, so I should be able to get by with just one coat, but paint a second if you need to. When painting all the markings, I made sure to leave a thin outline of black paint around them. That will help the yellow really stand out. With all those markings base coated, I highlighted them with flash Gitz yellow. Next I painted some of the metal areas with Runelord brass. And after that dried, I shaded it with Darkoath flesh. I painted the other metal areas with Iron Hand steel. And then I shaded the steel with Gryph-Charger gray. At this stage you could base the model and call it finished, but I'd like to keep going and add some more highlights. First let's highlight the edges of the green armor with some Moot green, thinned slightly with water. Moot green is a pretty big jump up in value, so it's even more important to make the line as narrow and as clean as possible. For a more blended effect, I like to take advantage of Moot green's transparency and paint a slightly wider line first. Once that dries, I'll paint a second line on top of it, a little more narrow and closer to the edge. Next I highlighted the edges of the yellow with Toxic Yellow. This color is also a big step up in value, so make sure the lines are very narrow. Rather than painting lines along the armor markings, I decided to paint spots on the corners instead. Let's highlight the black areas next with gray number 2 from my custom grayscale. And you can learn how to mix your own in this video here. If you don't feel like mixing anything, Eshin Gray is a close match. I'd like the black areas to look very dark, so I'm trying to keep this highlight as narrow as I can. The smaller the lines are, the darker the black will look. If any of the highlights look too wide, it's really easy to refine the edge with some black paint. Next I highlighted the black areas with gray number 4 from my custom grayscale, and if you don't feel like mixing anything, Dawnstone is a close match. I made this line more narrow than the last one, and I focused it on the upward facing edges and corners. I'd like to paint one more highlight on the weapons and the face mask to distinguish them from the leather. That way they look like they're a harder surface and more reflective. So I painted a few dots with gray Seer on the sharpest edges and corners. I think it's really easy to overdo these kinds of highlights, so I'm trying to keep them as small as possible. Next I highlighted the silver areas with Stormhost silver. I highlighted the brass areas with an equal parts mix of Stormhost silver and Runelord brass. You could use Canoptic alloy if you don't feel like mixing anything. It's a pretty close match. Gems are a great way to add some extra color to a model, and I'd like to paint the gems blue and red. I started off by painting all of them with black. I base coated the blue gems with Kantor blue, making sure to leave a thin black outline. Then I painted a layer of Caledor sky focused on the bottom half of the gem. I painted a crescent shape of Lothern blue along the bottom of the gem. Followed by an even smaller crescent using a mix of Lothern blue and white. And finally I painted a couple reflective dots with white. I used the same technique for the red gems, beginning with Khorne red. Then I painted Evil Sunz Scarlet on the bottom half. Then I painted a narrow crescent shape with Fire Dragon. Followed by a smaller highlight of Toxic Yellow. And then a couple white reflections. I used an old brush to paint a layer of wood glue on the base, and then sprinkled on some coarse gravel and fine sand. After the glue dried, I painted the sand with thinned Rhinox hide, followed by a dry brush of Mournfang brown, and then Balor brown. I painted the rocks with Dawnstone, shaded them with a mix of Agrax Earthshade and Nuln Oil, dry brushed with Dawnstone, and then dry brushed with a mix of Dawnstone and Bonewhite. I painted the edge of the base with Rhinox hide, and after that dried, I applied a few patches of static grass with superglue. I'd like to give a big shout out to our channel members. Thank you so much for your support, it really is a huge help. If you want to be like these amazing people and help support what I'm doing here, just click the join button down below. Thank you. Working on some Eldar has been a nice change of pace. I really like the variety of bright colors in an Eldar army. I think it makes the painting process a lot more interesting. Would you like to see more Eldar on the channel, or maybe a different 40k army? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy painting.